22X had already performed at the Gary Community Center talent show. A 16-year-old who could hit notes that made grown women cry. A jazz trio that had played at real clubs. A girl group with matching outfits and choreographed moves. And then there was contestant number 23, a 5-year-old boy who could barely see over the microphone stand. When the backstage coordinator called, "Michael Jackson, you're up," some people in the audience actually laughed. Not mean laughter exactly, more like, "Oh, that's cute." Laughter, the kind that says, "This isn't going to be serious competition." The three judges exchanged looks. They'd been sitting through this all day, and they were tired. They wanted to get to the real contenders. Get through the amateurs and find someone with actual potential. "What song are you singing, sweetheart?" one judge asked in that tone adults use when they're being patronizing without meaning to be. "Climb Every Mountain," Michael said, his voice so quiet the judge had to ask him to repeat it. From the sound of music, the judge smiled. The judge smiled. "That's a very hard song, honey. Are you sure you know all the words?" Michael nodded. "Okay, then whenever you're ready." Nobody in that room was ready for what came next. August 13th, 1964, Gary Community Center, Indiana. The annual Summer Talent Showcase was a big deal in Gary. It wasn't just about the $50 prize money, though that certainly mattered to families like the Jacksons. It was about exposure. Local radio DJs served as judges. The winner got airplay on WGRY, the biggest station in Northwest Indiana. For aspiring musicians in Gary, this was the golden ticket. The Jackson family had arrived at 9 a.m. Even though their slot wasn't until 2 p.m., Joe Jackson didn't believe in taking chances. Early meant getting to know the layout, understanding the acoustics, and watching the competition. 5-year-old Michael had spent the morning watching act after act, his eyes getting wider with each performance. These weren't kids singing in their garage. These were real performers with real talent. Professional-level talent. "Daddy," Michael whispered during one particularly good singer. "Everyone's so good." "You're better," Joe said flatly. It wasn't comfort. It was statement of fact. "You just need to prove it." Catherine squeezed Michael's hand. "Remember what we practiced, baby. Sing from your heart. Let them feel what you feel." Michael's 3 older brothers sat nearby, equally nervous. This was technically Michael's solo entry, but it was really an audition for all of them. If Michael impressed the judges, Joe planned to mention that Michael had brothers, that they could perform together. This was the beginning of the Jackson 5, though nobody knew it yet. At 1:45 p.m., the coordinator called Michael's name for the pre-stage check. They needed to set his microphone height and get his introduction card filled out. When they saw how small he was, the coordinator hesitated. "Honey, how old are you?" 5 years old. "Are you sure you want to do this? There are some really talented older kids competing today." "I'm sure," Michael said, his voice small but steady. The coordinator looked at Joe, who'd followed them backstage. "Sir, I just want to make sure he understands this is a real competition. The judges can be, well, they're honest. I'd hate to see him get his feelings hurt." "He'll be fine," Joe said. "Just make sure that microphone is at the right height." The 3 judges sat at a table in front of the stage. Marcus Webb, 44, was a DJ at WGRY and had been in the music business since he was 16. He'd seen thousands of performers. He could spot real talent in the first 10 seconds of a performance. Patricia Holmes, 38, ran a local music school and had trained half the performers competing that day. She had high standards and wasn't afraid to score harshly. Robert Bobby Freeman, 52, owned 2 record stores in Gary and knew what sold. He cared less about technical perfection and more about star quality, that indefinable thing that made people want to listen. They were on hour 5 of the competition. They'd seen good singers, decent dancers, a surprisingly talented harmonica player, and more mediocre acts than they cared to remember. They were tired. They were ready for this to be over. Number 23, the coordinator announced. Michael Jackson, age 5, performing Climb Every Mountain. Patricia looked at her score sheet. 5. Did she say 5 years old? That's what it says here, Marcus confirmed, checking his list. Bobby leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. This should be interesting. The curtain opened. Michael stood center stage, and several people in the audience actually said "ah" out loud. He was tiny, adorable, wearing a white shirt that was clearly borrowed from an older brother because the sleeves were rolled up, black pants that were a little too long, shoes that had been polished but were obviously old. His afro was neat but unstyled. His eyes were huge and nervous. The microphone stand had been lowered to its minimum height, and it was still almost at Michael's eye level. "Oh, honey," Patricia whispered to Marcus. "This is going to be rough." In the audience, Katherine Jackson held her breath. She could see how scared Michael was even from 15 rows back. Joe sat perfectly still, his face revealing nothing, but his jaw was tight. Everything was riding on the next 3 minutes. Michael's brothers leaned forward in their seats. Jackie had his fingers crossed. Tito was praying silently. Jermaine was chewing his thumbnail. "Whenever you're ready, Michael," Patricia said encouragingly. She'd already decided to give him a pity score, maybe a 4 out of 10. Enough to not crush his spirits, but honest enough to be fair to the real competitors. The music started. The orchestral introduction to Climb Every Mountain, one of the most challenging songs from The Sound of Music. A song that required range, power, and emotional depth. A song that grown professionals struggled with, and this 5-year-old was about to attempt it. Michael gripped the microphone stand with both hands. His knuckles were white. The introduction swelled. His cue was coming. He opened his mouth, and the Gary Community Center forgot how to breathe. The voice that came out of Michael Jackson's small body was impossible. It was pure, crystal clear. Not the cute, pitchy singing of a child trying their best. This was something else entirely. Climb every mountain, ford every stream. The note was perfect. The tone was controlled. But more than that, there was emotion in it. Real, genuine feeling that you couldn't fake or teach. Patricia's pen stopped moving on her score sheet. She just stared. Marcus sat up straighter, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. Bobby uncrossed his arms and leaned forward. In the audience, people who'd been chatting quietly or checking their programs stopped everything. Heads turned toward the stage. Michael's nervousness was melting away. This was what he'd been practicing for months. This was what he heard in his head when he listened to the record at home. This was what his mother told him to feel in his heart. Follow every rainbow till you find your dream. His voice got stronger, more confident. He wasn't just singing the notes anymore. He was telling a story. A 5-year-old child was conveying hope and determination and courage in a way that made grown adults feel something stirring in their chests. Katherine had tears streaming down her face. Her baby, her youngest boy, he was doing it. Joe's expression finally changed. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. He'd known. He'd always known Michael had this in him. Michael's brothers were frozen, watching their little brother command a stage in a way they'd never seen before. The song built to its climax. This was the part where most singers struggled, where the notes got high and demanding, where you needed both power and control. A dream that will need all the love you can give. Michael's voice soared. He wasn't straining. He wasn't forcing it. The note came out like it was the most natural thing in the world. Every day of your life, for as long as you live, the final phrase, the money moment, the part where you either nailed it or fell apart. Michael closed his eyes, and he sang it like he was singing to God himself. Climb every mountain, ford every stream, follow every rainbow, till you find your dream. The final note hung in the air. Pure, perfect, impossible. The music faded. Michael opened his eyes. For a moment, the Gary Community Center was completely silent. Then it exploded. The audience leaped to their feet. The applause was deafening. People were shouting. Someone yelled, "Oh my God!" A woman in the third row was openly crying. The backstage coordinator stood in the wings with her mouth hanging open. At the judges' table, Patricia Holmes had both hands over her mouth. Marcus Webb was shaking his head in disbelief. Bobby Freeman was grinning like he'd just discovered gold. Michael stood on stage, blinking in the spotlight, not quite understanding what was happening. Had he done okay? Did they like it? "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said into his microphone, his voice shaky, "I need everyone to quiet down for a moment." The applause gradually subsided. Marcus looked at Michael. "Son, how old did you say you were?" "5," Michael said softly. "5 years old," Marcus repeated, as if saying it out loud would make it make sense. "How long have you been singing?" Michael thought about it. "Always, I guess. Mama says I was humming before I could talk." "Who taught you to sing like that?" "Nobody taught me. I hear it in my head and then I sing it." Marcus looked at his fellow judges. Patricia was nodding frantically. Bobby was already writing his score. "Michael," Patricia said, her voice gentle but excited, "that was the most incredible thing I've heard in 20 years of teaching music. Do you understand that? You're 5 years old, and you just sang better than most professional adults." Michael didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. "Do you have any other songs prepared?" Bobby asked. I know lots of songs. Pick your favorite right now. Sing it for us." Joe Jackson stood up in the audience. "Gentlemen, if I may, Michael has 3 older brothers who sing as well. They're here today." Marcus looked at Joe, then at Michael. "Your brothers sing like you?" "They're real good," Michael said loyally. "Better than me." Patricia actually laughed at that. "Honey, I sincerely doubt anyone sings better than you." But Marcus was interested. "Bring them up. Let's hear it." 5 minutes later, Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, and Michael stood on stage together. This was unplanned, unrehearsed as a group performance, but Joe had made them practice together so many times that they could harmonize in their sleep. They sang, "You've Really Got a Hold on Me" by The Miracles. And if Michael's solo performance had impressed the judges, the 4 brothers together made them believers. Jackie's smooth tenor, Tito's solid rhythm, Jermaine's rich tone, and Michael, 5 years old, singing lead with a voice that tied it all together. When they finished, Bobby Freeman stood up from the judges' table and walked onto the stage. "I'm going to tell you boys something," he said, looking at each of them. "And I want you to remember this moment. You are going to be famous. I don't mean local famous. I mean real famous. National. Maybe even international. What you have," he pointed at Michael. "What he has doesn't come along often. Maybe once in a generation." He turned to Joe. "Sir, I want to talk to you after this competition ends. I know people who can help these boys." The Jackson boys won first place unanimously. All 3 judges gave them perfect scores. But more importantly, Bobby Freeman introduced Joe to a promoter named Charles Baker, who started booking the Jackson brothers for paid gigs around Indiana. Within 6 months, the Jackson 5 officially existed. Within a year, they were performing 3 nights a week. Within 3 years, they were auditioning for Motown. But it all started on August 13, 1964, in a community center in Gary, Indiana, when a 5-year-old boy who could barely see over the microphone stand taught a room full of skeptics that talent has no age requirement. Years later, Patricia Holmes was interviewed for a documentary about Michael Jackson's early life. The moment he started singing, Patricia said, "I literally forgot he was 5 years old. His voice, his emotion, his control. It was like listening to someone who had been performing for decades. I've taught music for 45 years. I've heard thousands of children sing. And I have never before or since heard anything like Michael Jackson at 5 years old." "What did you think when you first saw him walk on stage?" the interviewer asked. Patricia smiled. "Honestly, I thought this poor kid is about to embarrass himself. I was ready to give him a pity score and move on to the next act. I'd already decided he was too young, too small, too inexperienced. And then he opened his mouth and I realized that everything I thought I knew about talent and age and experience was wrong. Michael Jackson didn't just sing that day. He taught every adult in that room a lesson about assumptions. What was the lesson? That genius doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't care if you think someone's too young or too small or too anything. When it's real, when it's authentic, you can't deny it. You can only witness it and feel grateful that you were there when it happened. The score sheet from that day still exists. It's in a private collection now, but it's been photographed and documented. Under Michael Jackson's name in Patricia Holmes' handwriting, there's a note that wasn't required. A note she added because she felt compelled to document what she'd witnessed. It reads, 5 years old, sang, climb every mountain. This child is a miracle. Mark this day. We just met someone who's going to change the world. She was right. August 13, 1964 was the day the world discovered Michael Jackson. They just didn't know it.